This is Your Anxiety Toolkit, episode number 278. Welcome to Your Anxiety Toolkit. I'm your host, Kimberly Quinlan. This podcast is fueled by three main goals. The first goal is to provide you with some extra tools to help you manage your anxiety. Second goal, to inspire you. Anxiety doesn't get to decide how you live your life. And number three, and I leave the best for last, is to provide you with one big, fat virtual hug. Because experiencing anxiety ain't easy. If that sounds good to you, let's go. Well, welcome back, everybody. I am so thrilled to be here with you today. I recently got back from a 3-day silent retreat. I was by myself for the entire 3 days. It was a 3-day self-led silent retreat. I have done silent retreats in the past at Buddhist monasteries and Buddhist retreat centers. This is the first time I've done it on my own, and I followed the Tara Brach self-retreat website. I will leave the notes in the show notes so that you can check that out. It was amazing. I can't lie. I had so many mind-blowing moments, and I want to share with you each and every single one. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version, otherwise I would have you here for days on end, but I am so excited to share that with you. Now, before we do that, of course, you know we always do the I did a hard thing. This is a segment where someone can write in, submit the hard thing they've done. This one is by MG Wolfie 1992, and they've said, I have OCD and ASD. Certain shirts do not feel right. Before starting ERP, when I'd put on a shirt that's uncomfortable, I'd immediately take it off, which was making me late for work. After starting ERP, I have slowly worked my way up to wearing and keeping that uncomfortable shirt on for 12 minutes. So MG Wolfie 1992, this is just you doing the work. I'm so impressed. And this is exactly what it's like for everybody listening or watching today. It is about just small baby increments and getting yourself higher and higher and a little more difficult. And so I'm so impressed with the work that you're doing. This is just so incredibly powerful and rewarding. And I hope that you keep going. All right. Let's talk about what I learned from my 3-day silent retreat. Okay, so just to kind of give you a setup, I rented through Airbnb a small little cabin in the depths of Topanga, which is very close to where I live in Los Angeles. And I was following the Tara Brach home retreat that she created at the beginning of COVID. Now, when COVID hit, I so desperately wanted to do this, but I was in the middle of writing the self-compassion workbook for OCD. And so I did not have time or the bandwidth to really go and really be with myself. I just had so much going on. And as you probably remember, the world just felt so scary and no one knew what was happening. So I definitely wasn't ready to do something at that time. After several years or even months, we're at this point where I feel like I've really prioritized my mental health and my medical health. I was finally in a place where I just felt like I needed some time to really go and let go of some things. I could be doing this at home. I could do this every day, and I have since I returned, but I really felt that I needed these 3 days to do a deep dive into really some things that I had been working through, having a medical illness, a chronic illness. I have postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, really coming down out of the pandemic and so forth. And so I really felt like I just needed this time to really not have the kids around and just drop down in and do that really hard work. I took with me a journal. I took with me a book called Mindfulness by Joseph Goldstein. I strongly recommend that you try it. It is very heavy on the Buddhist philosophy, but it is such an important book about mindfulness. And so to start off, the thing that I learned the most was I needed so desperately to go back to basics. Everything felt so complex. Everything I was teaching, everything I was doing in therapy, the practices of my own, it just felt like there was so many spinning parts. And when I got there, I just dropped down to like, Kimberly, let's go back to the basics. And so I wanted to share with you what those basics were. So, number one, I went right back to the core of mindfulness, which was mostly me. The main agenda was to observe what showed up instead of being in reaction to it. So here, when life is so busy and chaotic and so many things happening at once, it's really hard to be an observer. And I kind of think I have lost my ability to do that. And so once I got there, I promised myself and my friends that I would not be contacting them, that I would have just one part of the day where I would text people back. I would check my phone, make sure everybody was okay and my clients were okay and my staff were okay. I would respond back, but very limited. And that throughout the day, if I felt the need to pick up my phone or I felt the need to call or I felt the need that I needed to talk to someone, that I had to stay in that feeling. And that's why I really chose the silent retreat. I wanted to create an environment where I couldn't rely on anybody except myself. And that no matter what I felt, I had to hang on and I had to ride it out. And I wanted to really drop down a little deeper and really explore what was going on for me. Now, the thing that was most profound is the first day was excruciating. I mean, painful. I had every emotion under the sun. At one point, at the evening when I told my husband I would call after me wading through these emotions all day, I did text and he asked how I was doing. And I said, this is so hard. I don't even want to be here. And I didn't ask for his advice, but he did say via text, just keep going. And so I did, of course I did. But what was so fascinating to me, and one thing I really learned about myself, and I'm wondering if you do the same thing, is I had gone into this silent retreat not exhausted. Usually by the time I take a break, I am so wiped out that I'm like completely like starfish on the bed, like completely out of it. And this was really interesting because for the first time, I wasn't exhausted. And on the first day, I kept having the thought, you don't deserve this. I kept thinking, this is ridiculous. People are at war. There's floods in my home country. People, so many people have it worse than me. You don't deserve this, Kimberly. This is unnecessary. This is actually very silly of you to have asked to do this 3-day silent retreat. And I was so shocked at those thoughts. Now, here is where the observing skill was so helpful for me, is instead of having that thought and then going, yeah, you're right, and then beating myself up, or maybe even going home, or feeling guilty, or, punishing myself, I just observed it and went, that's interesting. I'm having thoughts that this is selfish, or I'm having thoughts that this was silly. Instead of fusing with those thoughts, I just observed them. And I also observed the feeling and going, I feel guilty or I feel selfish. But instead of saying I am guilty and I am selfish, I didn't over-identify with those emotions, which is another mindfulness skill that I wanted to go back to the basics, is how much we over-identify with the thoughts we have. If something is uncomfortable, we go, oh, that means it must have to go away. And this is wrong. And I'm wrong. And I shouldn't be feeling this way. Instead, I just sat in it and I want you to just imagine me. If you're listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see me, but if you're watching me on video right now, I just had my head and it kept nodding and smiling and kind of like I was almost dancing with my head of just going, yes, brain, I hear you. Yes, mind, I can hear what you're saying, but I'm not going to connect with that. I'm going to allow it. I'm not going to push it away, but I'm just going to observe it. And oh my gosh, I had so many breakthroughs, one after the other, of just catching these rules and beliefs I have and how invasive they are and how reactive I am to them, right? Even though I've practiced this for years, I just knew I needed this time to let go of all of this. Now, the second thing I learned, besides really dropping down into the basics and observing everything and not identifying, was in the mindfulness book that I was reading, and I had it as my agenda to read it, is I had to practice going back to accepting impermanence. Now, impermanence is a Buddhist concept that they talk about a lot. And basically what it means is that this is temporary. And so as I sat and I meditated so much on this 3-day retreat, not so much the second day, but the first and the third day were really good meditation days. I sat on my meditation seat and all I would do is just try to stay in the moment and notice the impermanence. So as a satisfying feeling showed up, I would just notice that this is temporary, that it will go, and I'm not going to cling to it. As an uncomfortable thought showed up, I said to myself, this is temporary. I'm not going to cling to it. I'm not going to push it away. And everything that showed up, I just kept going, this is temporary. This is temporary. And some people would probably argue that that's a problem, right? Like, no, why would you push away good thoughts? But I had to keep reminding myself that my attachment to good is what creates a lot of my suffering, right? A lot about impermanence is also looking at the fact that everything is temporary. So in these beautiful rental that I had, there was these beautiful windows, and I would sit right at the edge of the window and it would overlook this beautiful creek, all these trees and leaves. And a part of the meditation that I had practiced, and I have practiced for many years, is to meditate on impermanence, which is to sit and look. This time my eyes were open, and everything I see, I contemplated how temporary it is. So if it was a leaf that is just newly budded, I would imagine it fully coming into bloom, falling off the tree, and then completely breaking down into the ground where it was muddy and sludgy and yucky. And then looking at, let's say, the wood and going, yes, that too will break down over time. Looking at my hand and my face and my body and imagining me too once was very youthful and now looking slightly older, and acknowledging that that too is impermanence and that I too will die. And from that meditation, I cried, I sobbed actually, and I let go of a lot of beliefs and values I was hanging on to that really aren't my values, in terms of me having to stay young, that me having to stay liked by people, that I had to hold on to this idea. And instead, I was actually moving towards saying, it's okay. You can like me or hate me, because you liking me may actually be temporary, and you may only need me for a period in your life, and then you may not need me. And then again, observing what showed up for me and letting go of that too. It was just this massive cycle, and it kept going and going, and I would keep hitting these same things that I needed to let go of and learn and practice, like observing and recognizing that things are temporary and that it doesn't mean anything about me, right? So I know this may actually be a lot, but I can't tell you how powerful it was. It was such a beautiful experience of letting go, of catching where I'm attached to things and then letting go of that as well. And I'm not saying that because I let them go, they don't bother me anymore. I am now in a cycle, and it sort of got me going and now allowing that letting go to be more automatic. Whereas before, I used to joke with my husband and my best friend was when they'd make a suggestion to me, like maybe they would offer me some advice, I would respond a little defensively. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted this 3-day retreat is I could feel the tension in me on how inflexible I was and how I was being stubborn and holding tight on things. And I knew that's not what my core nature is, right? So I'm going to keep this short and I'll give you one more thing that I learned. And this thing has probably been the most beautiful lesson I've ever learned. And it's been so synchronistic because so many things have really reinforced things since I've returned. And this is the idea of independence versus interdependent. I think since I recovered from my eating disorder, I have made it my goal to be independent. I don't want to rely on people. I don't want to ask them for help. I want to be a strong woman. I want to be a powerful human. I want to be peaceful in myself. I want to be self-sustaining, if that makes sense. And this has been such an amazing growth for me, right? I have learned so much and really learned my own strength because I made a deal with myself that I would always be my first person, right? And through that, I have learned to trust myself, to rely on myself, that I'm stronger than I thought. It's a big reason why I say it's a beautiful day to do hard things is because I've practiced that my whole life. But I was reading something from one of these in the Tara Brach retreat. She has a lot of retreat talks, and I was listening to some of these Dharma talks. And one of them was about that we're interdependent. Like, even though we're independent, we also need other people. And that actually through being interdependent is where we build community. And it made me realize that I think I've swung too far in the independent. If there was a pendulum swinging, I'd swung too far in the independent. And I needed to recognize how much I need other people. I need my friends. I need my husband more. I need my children more in different areas. That I need to ask for help more. It doesn't mean I have to pay people. It doesn't mean they owe me. It doesn't mean I now fully swung the other direction into always being dependent. It's that I've acknowledged that change happens more on the local level. Since I created this podcast and I have an Instagram profile, I think my mind had very much gone to large scale. Like I have to make a huge difference, that I could make a huge difference. And something came through me, a sense of knowing in terms of, yes, I can make a large difference, but I can't forget the local difference that I can make. The connection with my neighbors, right? The connection with my school. Particularly since COVID, we've become so technological. How can I actually connect with people more on a one-to-one basis instead of a 1-to-1,000? And for some reason, that really spoke to me. And I've never been more empowered and excited to serve you all because I think I needed to come out of the big crowd, thousands of people, and really just start to go back to thinking one-to-one and thinking about the person instead of the crowd. And I think that will help me a lot in terms of being more connected, feeling not lonely in things. You know, they have that whole thing about you can be surrounded by people but still feel lonely. And I think that's probably why I felt lonely in the past. So they're the main things I learned. There are so many more, but really I just want to emphasize, if you can, create a 1-day or even a half-day silent retreat where you sit and really be with your emotions and commit to seeing what comes up. You will be shocked at the explosions of experiences that you have inside you. It doesn't have to be 3 days. You don't have to rent someplace. You could do it in your own home, even in one room if you needed, and really drop down. And when those really painful emotions come up, really sit with them and be with them and practice sort of letting them wax and wane as much as you can. Okay? So that's what I learned. I hope that that has been inspiring to you in some way or another. For me, I'm more committed to my meditation practice than I've ever been. I'm more committed to my mindfulness than I've ever been. And I'm more connected to my business than I've ever been, which is really, really beautiful. All right. So thank you so much. I am so grateful for you being here with me today. I just love this work I'm doing with you, and I hope that it is beneficial to you. Before we finish up, let's do the review of the week. This is from K Demo, and they said, "This podcast is a gift. I just found this podcast and I'm binging on the episodes. I learned something through each episode and I love her practical advice and tools. I feel like a part of the community. What a gift." Thank you, K Demo. Please, please do go and leave a review. I know you are very busy. I very much respect your time, but the best gift you can give me is just a review, an honest review. It helps me to reach more people, and that makes me feel so fulfilled and happy. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Please note that this podcast or any other resources from cbtschool.com should not replace professional mental health care. If you feel you would benefit, please reach out to a provider in your area. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for supporting cbtschool.com.